Hi everyone, welcome to your second lecture on photosynthesis, and in this one we're going to go a little bit into the detail of how it actually works. So there are two stages of photosynthesis, the light-dependent reaction and then the light-independent reaction, also known as the dark reaction or the Calvin cycle, because the scientist that discovered the Calvin cycle, well, that was his name, Calvin. When you think about photosynthesis, I want you to break the word into its two parts. Photo, meaning light, and synthesis, meaning to make. The first part, photo, would be the light-dependent reaction, or the reaction that requires the input of the energy from the sun in order to work. The next reaction, you're making the glucose, and that does not require, that is the second half, and it does happen during the daytime. It just does not require the input of light from the sun to run that reaction. So that's why it's better to call it the Calvin cycle than to call it a dark reaction. The light-dependent reaction, or the first part, occurs in the thylakoid membrane. And if we remember what the thylakoid membrane looked like, that was those stacks that look like stacks of pancakes or stacks of coins inside the chloroplast membrane. You do have a picture of it in your notes. The first thing that happens is light is absorbed by the chlorophyll in photosystem 2, and the electrons are excited. So chlorophyll is again the pigment within the cells, and photosystem 2 is just the name of the first protein in the chain that the electrons are going to move through. You'll see that in our next slide. The excited electrons move through a series of reactions that is called the electron transport chain, because it takes electrons and moves them. It transports them. For the light-dependent reaction, this is occurring in the thylakoid membrane. So the membrane inside the chloroplast that looks like stacks of coins or stacks of pancakes. First, I want to break it down and just look at what is being input. What is coming into this? What are the reactants? So the first is energy from light. And you can see that here where I'm putting these arrows going in to help power this along. Second thing that's being input into the reaction is water. And you can see that the molecule of water right here, I just put a little circle about it, and that's right at the beginning of photosystem 2. The things that are being produced are your chemicals NADPH and ATP. And these are going to be your source of energy, and they are being produced and released into the stroma, so they can go for the next portion, which is to be used in the Calvin cycle, or the light-independent reaction. So the first thing that happens in photosystem 2, photosystem 2 is this first green protein right here, and it is the first one that we go to in the electron transport chain. It is not named photosystem 1. Photosystem 1 is the second green protein, because photosystem 1 was discovered first, so it was called 1, and then photosystem 2 was discovered second, but photosystem 2 is the first one in the reaction. Okay, so light is actually absorbed by photosystem 2, and it's used to break up that water molecule. So this water molecule gets put into photosystem 2, and it's broken into three things. You have your hydrogen ions, you have your oxygen right here, and then you have your electrons. Okay, remember, a hydrogen ion is a hydrogen molecule that's lost its electrons. So the electrons are being put here into this electron transport chain. So this is getting a little busy right now, so I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this so we can follow what is going on with the electrons. So the high energy electrons from photosystem 2 move through the electron transport chain to photosystem 1. So you can follow it here. I just kind of drew it with that black line, but you can follow it with the arrows here. And then the next thing that happens at photosystem 1 is electrons are released by photosystem 2 and energized again in photosystem 1. And the enzyme in the membrane use the electrons to form NADPH, which I circled down here. And NADPH is used to make the sugar in the Calvin cycle. Every time that electron is moving through these proteins in the electron transport chain, the molecules of hydrogen that are positively charged, hydrogen ions, are pumped through into the lumen or inner thylakoid space. So you get a bunch of, a large buildup of hydrogen ions inside. So you can see them all floating in here right now. I'm just circling them. The inside of the thylakoid membrane fills up with the positively charged hydrogen ions, and this makes the outside of the thylakoid membrane negatively charged and the inside positively charged. What will happen with those positively charged ions here is that they're going to go through another protein called ATP synthase. And every time a hydrogen ion gets pumped through that, an additional phosphate gets added to an ADP molecule, and it turns it into ATP, which is going to be used for your energy. So as hydrogen ions pass through the ATP synthase molecule, it's converted, this energy is used to convert ADP into ATP. So again, this is a lot of information. The important things are that water and light are used to make energy, ATP. The NADPH and the ATP are going to go on to the Calvin cycle. We saw this in the other diagram, but the light energy splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen gas is released into the atmosphere, and that is what we breathe. It is just a byproduct. And the hydrogen bonds to a carrier molecule, NADPH, to be carried to the dark reactions. Splitting the water also creates ATP, which is the energy currency. This is a picture of the light reaction that is occurring in the thylakoid membrane inside the chloroplast with light, sunlight, and water going into the thylakoid membrane. And then it is producing NADPH and ATP, and oxygen is a byproduct. The end products are NADPH, ATP, and O2. The light-independent reactions, or the Calvin cycles, do not require light. They do happen during the day, but they do not require light to be put into the reaction. They can also be called the dark reaction or the Calvin cycle. And they occur in the stroma, which is that fluid outside of the thylakoid membrane. So what happens here is that carbon dioxide enters into the plant and attaches to a sugar molecule. It's called carbon fixation. Carbon dioxide, NADPH, and ATP combine with enzymes to make glucose, which is your sugar, C6H12O6, and more carbon dioxide. In the Calvin cycle, you have your input of carbon dioxide, and that is fixed to be usable, okay, along with the NADPH and the ATP, and the product is glucose. Together, this entire thing is the process of photosynthesis. Again, for photosynthesis, you need light, water, and carbon dioxide to be put in. And then your end products are oxygen and glucose. Light and water get put into the light-dependent reaction, and they produce that oxygen gas as a byproduct. And then carbon dioxide enters into the Calvin cycle, or the light-independent reaction, and produces glucose, or the sugars. And that is what the plant needs for its structure and what we need for food and fuel. A couple things that can affect photosynthesis are the light intensity. The more light, the faster the rate of photosynthesis. The carbon dioxide concentration. The more carbon dioxide gas you have in the atmosphere, the faster the rate of photosynthesis. Also, temperature can affect the rate of photosynthesis. If the temperatures are too hot or too cold, it will slow down the rate of photosynthesis drastically.